to convert the NanoVG code, which is more general. So NanoVG is a GUI library for C++. I'm trying to convert to just get the parts that are related to text rendering. It is not that hard actually to understand how it works, but it's kind of confusing and annoying to do it. Because the annoying parts are to understand how the shader should be done and how to, which is the part that I'm gonna focus now, how to structure the vertices that you have to send to OpenGL. I'm not really sure if I'm gonna be able to do it because it is kind of confusing. So like this is the biggest problem is because of the way that they render everything on NanoVG. They create a whole pipeline and then throughout the pipeline they build the vertices. I think they put all together and then they give you the option to use an uniform buffer or however you say that, which is I think is UBO the thing. I think is uniform buffer object. So the way the uniform buffer object works is that you set all the uniforms at once and they give you the option to do that. So it's kind of confusing because some of the parts, I think this frag here, for example, is related to this, but I'm not really sure. The other difference is that they are using C, so they're manually allocating memory. But I think that since I'm using C++, it's a lot easier to just use a vector because then the vector under the hood is gonna reallocate the memory and I don't have to worry about it. So they have this function here, render triangles, inside of this other function, which is render text. This one's going to be called on the main function that I'm trying to translate, which is this one that I think I'm understanding more now how it works. So there is another library called Fontstash. Fontstash has some functions that are going to interact with STB true type. And the way that it works is that STB true type has a bunch of functions that are going to take a file as an input, then they're going to extract the information from the file, and then they are going to create the bits or create the information that is necessary to render the text as an image. So they parse the TTF file, and as far as I understand, the way that they are doing on NanoVG is with font atlas, which is just an image that contains a bunch of characters. For all the characters you're going to render are in just one image, and then you extract that information from the image, which it is the file. So I have the TTF file here. Then from this file is going to be just an image, or it's going to be the font atlas, which has all the information for the characters, for rendering the characters. Then STB gets that file, and then they return a bunch of information inside of a struct that contains the stuff that is necessary to render. So I have an image from the Learn OpenGL thing. And it's surprisingly very hard. There are some videos that talk about this, but I couldn't find a library or an easy way to render. So just kind of strange, but I think that the reason why it is like this is because most people probably use an engine like Unreal engine or the other one that I forgot. I think that they are the most popular. So I think it's on graphics actually. And this is kind of the annoying thing because I managed to make one solution work, but the text wasn't showing on the screen. And this is another thing that I had to study more, which is how to debug OpenGL applications, because when everything was compiling and everything was running, but nothing was showing. And it's kind of annoying to get information from OpenGL because I created this function here, but there's another thing you can do, which I'm doing now, but it doesn't seem to work very well. You just pass a flag here, and you activate this debug context. And what this will do is will show a message on the terminal every time that there's an error with OpenGL. And the other thing that I did was to create this function here that just prints what kind of error it is. So when you use this function, GL get error, after an OpenGL call or a bunch of OpenGL calls, it's just gonna print whatever error it is. But the problem is, if you do everything right and everything compiles and runs, and no error shows, then it's very hard to know, because obviously the main thing that it made me think is just that the view is wrong. And this is kind of the part that is kind of annoying, because I was looking through a bunch of different ways to do it, and all of the ways use different shaders, obviously. So it's kind of hard to know. And then I spent a bunch of time like getting the projection matrix from the other project and building the view matrix, and then multiplying, changing the shader code so the position of the object is multiplied by the view and the projection, but it still wasn't showing anything. So I used this this program here called RenderDoc. And there are other programs that I found that were recommended to me. One is Tracy, that they have a, maybe I should open. The other one is GL Intercept, but I didn't use these other ones because it just adds more stuff. I want to minimize the amount of dependencies as much as possible. So that's kind of the downside. So I was trying to avoid using these other things. I have to, I'm not going to be able to use, if I use because I have to, I think GitHub is being attacked or something like that with spam. So now they're forcing you to use the two-factor authentication. So I have to open like this. This is one of the repositories, which is a profiler. And this is the thing that I kind of don't like about this as well, about this style of debugging. It's very useful, but then it like increases the amount of dependencies. Ideally, I wanted to find something that only allows me to print or use stuff that is already embedded on C++ or C to debug. But this was very useful because I mainly use this one. The other ones I didn't use. But what this allows you to do is you just go here and then you put the executable path, then you launch, and then it's gonna allow you to capture a frame from the thing. Then once you capture the frame, you can use all these tabs here to figure out information about it. So what I figure out is that once you run, there is a fragment shader option here, I think, as well. Yeah, there definitely is after the rasterizer. I think it's showing now because I don't have the frame, but maybe I should try to capture there. Because they changed the executable, but it should be pretty much the same. So select the path, clicking here, then you click on launch. And just launches this terminal here, and this is what the executable is showing, the application. Then you just go here, and then you click capture frame, then you click here, and then it shows information for the frame. So I went here, and then I went on fragment shader, and then there was an option here. I'm not really sure why it's not showing now, but it's probably because I'm not rendering anything now, because I changed the code. But if you're rendering things, then it's going to show the buffers, the information from the buffers, what calls are made for OpenGL. And then you can click on the fragment shader, and then it's going to go to this window here. And then it's going to show what the fragment is showing. And then because of that, I realized that the thing was actually rendering. It wasn't rendering correctly, so some of the words were wrong, but it was actually rendering something. And the problem was that the texture was off the screen. And then I spent a bunch of time trying to solve that, but it was still not working because it was rendering a bunch of different images and the position was all wrong. After I changed the shader and spent a bunch of time trying to figure out. And the main thing that I didn't figure out how to solve here is that when it shows the texture view, it's not like it's showing the whole application. So what I wanted to know is how can I know what's the position of the texture in relationship to the position of the world? And I couldn't find information because there isn't a lot of videos about this, and the documentation doesn't talk about it that much. But I did find very useful to like kind of just to see the texture. It makes it easier, and there's a bunch of things here. I haven't spent a bunch of time looking into all the other stuff we can do. But then I went back to the other way that I was trying to do, which is just to try to change the NanoVG. But since NanoVG is a generic library, the way that they build the pipeline, you should just put a bunch of vertices for everything that is going to be rendered across the thing. And this is the thing that I don't know, because on the documentation they don't say, but there is this example function here to render the text. But in none of these functions here, they have calls to OpenGL to actually draw the elements. So the one that I imagine, and I'm not really sure, but I think it's the only thing that makes sense, is the end frame or something like that. The function end frame. And this is the one that is actually gonna flush everything to the screen, which just means that it's gonna call the functions from OpenGL to render all the stuff. And this is gonna be based on whatever they have a struct that is gonna keep track of the amount of calls and the amount of vertices. And then based on that, they render. They call OpenGL based on the type of the call to render all the triangles or whatever thing you're gonna render. So this is what I'm trying to figure out now. So this is the main one as far as I understand, and I'm gonna create a function. So the biggest difference is that, and this is another thing that is kind of misleading, but this render text here function that they have, it seems like it doesn't have anything with actually rendering the text. And this is the thing that I'm trying to understand. Is they have this NFG text, and then inside of this they have this render text here. But the only thing that this does, it seems that, so they hold everything on this state, which is another struct, which I'm not going to use because I'm using a class. Then the other part that I didn't like that much is that they use these font images here. So they do some weird thing to, I think that for the thing that they are trying to do probably makes more sense, but it's still kind of confusing. So they link the texture that they're going to use in two different ways. And I'm not 100% sure if I'm going to need that or not, because like in one way, I think it might be nice, because then you can have a label that uses several different font files. But in another way, what you can also do is just put a logic to just recreate the buffers if you change the file. Or maybe you don't even need to do that. You just use a different file, and then you have the logic to extract the information from the fonts separately. But this is kind of the thing that I'm trying to figure out, because it's kind of hard, because there is these nuances here of the information you need to render the text, and how to make the images that you're gonna upload to OpenGL to actually render. So one way is that you would create an image for each single character, and then you do a bunch of OpenGL calls to put all the images side by side. And the other one, I think, is to use the atlas, which is an image that has all the characters. Then you use that information to create the data that is going to allow you to specify the vertices and the information necessary to render any character. So you just loop over the text. Then based on the information you got from the atlas, you verify the coordinates of where the character is in relationship to the atlas. Then you get the information, you build a picture, and then you send everything at once. I think that's how they do it, but I'm not 100% sure. I think I'm gonna search for texture plus. And this is the stuff that I'm trying to clarify. It's very confusing. So objectively, the part that is hardest is what STB does, which is just reading the file and extracting the information. And then after that's not that hard, but the hard part is to understand how to structure things on OpenGL and what is the correct way to build each image. So this is pretty much what I was talking about. But I'm not 100% sure, but as far as I understand, that's how you do it. You have, like, this would be the, but I'm not 100% sure about this, but I think this would be the TTF file that it contains this information, and then STB is gonna get this info and translate into other stuff. And then they're using these functions here from Fontstash. So this is the main, maybe I should go all the way from the beginning to show. I'm not using the same shaders as they are doing, and that's another thing, because the shaders they're using are more, I believe they're more generic. So because they allow you to build any GUI element. I'm gonna have to. Okay, so seems like. Yeah, so there's a library to render any GUI element, not just stacks. So I think that the shaders that they have are more generic. And then based on the documentation here, they don't explain. Like on the example, that it's not clear if you should use end frame or not. But I believe that's the only thing that makes sense. Otherwise, it wouldn't render anything. So I believe that all of the drawings are gonna start with this begin path and end with the end frame thing. And then in the middle, you put the function there on the example to render the text. These are just gonna set based on the state, which is a struct that they use to keep track of what's gonna be rendered, like the state, as it says. And based on that, it's gonna have the specifications of what you need to render. And this one is the final one that's gonna create the vertices based on the fonts that you created in the beginning. They have another function here that I also copied to is this one. This one's gonna call a Fontstash function, and the Fontstash is gonna interact with STB to actually read the file and extract the information from the file, and then it's gonna cache that information somewhere that I don't understand very well yet. I'm just trying to get to the point where something works, and after that point, I can think about how to understand this more, and then how to simplify as much as possible. They open the file here in binary, then they pass the data here, and this is a Fontstash, which is another library. And this stash is going to be the main thing that you use. Is a data structure from Fontstash that's going to be used to keep track of the information from the font. So I think this one loads the fonts. Should be one that is init. Maybe it's. I think it's on the other one. This one just caches the fonts into some data structure. Oh, it's here. Init fonts. This one is going to initialize on stbtt. And then they just extract the information. So this is going to be the data that was converted because you read the file in binary, and then you put that on the buffer, I think, or this unsigned char. And then they're going to create this stuff here, which extracts this information, which is another part that's kind of annoying to understand because the names are different. So all that information that the STB is getting is this information here. Because the thing that is tricky about the text is that different letters are going to have different heights. And you don't think about it, but like when you write, you obviously, like for example, the G is going to have this bottom part below the other letters. So there's a variance in the relative height of different letters. And because if you put everything in the base, then the text is weird. So you have to think about all these things, and then, yeah, this is the responsibility for the person that creates the font. They encode everything on the file, and then STB reads the file, gets this information, and then they're gonna put somewhere here. I think it's on this struct. Yeah, font info, and then Fontstash is gonna keep track of the info on the other struct. They have to keep track of the fonts. So this is one of the things that is confusing as well, because NanoVG, they have this thing called font images, which is it is an array of integers that they use to keep track of different fonts or different images that they're going to use. But this is a thing that I'm not really sure, because I don't know if they use this array of integers to render a bunch of different images, or if they're just using to render fonts, or to give the options of using different fonts for different tasks. And I'm not really sure if that's a good idea for the thing that I'm doing there, or if there's an easier way where, like I said before, you just, depending on what kind of font, you just delete the previous buffers and you just like do some logic like that. I think it would make it easier. But on the rendering cycle, so like this is the flow chart for NVG. The first one is this create internal, then they're gonna call this function render create. This one is gonna create the texture, which is the, so first you have you create the shader, Let me see if I can find the shader code for their stuff. Yeah, this is the function. So this is the shader code that they use. It's a lot more complicated than the one that I'm trying to use. But the way that as far as I understand now, the way that you render images on OpenGL is by calling this function here. It is a built-in function from OpenGL. And there's another thing that I've studied that it seems that using out vec4 color, which is a variable, is more updated, is more up to date than using GL frag color, which I think was the other way around. I thought it was the other way around, but it seems like it is more recommended now to use this out vec4 color variable. But so basically the way that it works is that you send the data for the position and the color at the same time to the fragment shader, to the vertex shader, and structure the buffers in this way that you're going to send both the data at the same time. And then you declare these variables here that are going to be the ones that you get replaced by the data that you're sending. And then this one is going to be the one that's, so whenever you have the out on the vertex shader, it means that you're going to use that variable on the fragment shader. So it's sending from the vertex to the fragment. So just send the position. The position is used here to calculate where the position of the point is going to be, the GL position. And the other, which is the color, is going to be equal to this other one. So this is the one that is sent to the shader, which is equal to the other one that is going to be sent to the fragment, which is this one. And this one is the main thing that is used on the texture function to render the image. So there's this, and there's this other thing. This variable here is the one that's going to be responsible for creating the image. So it's the information of the image, as far as I understand. And in this case, it's image 2D, and I think I'm going to do 2D. So because most of the libraries are 2D, and I imagine that for rendering 3D images is a lot harder. So the way that you do it, or that I'm thinking about doing, is you render in 2D. And then the position of the image is dependent, like you can calculate the position. So the way that they are doing here is on 2D, the position, because the vertex is a vec2. But the way that I'm thinking about doing, you just translate this into a vec3, and then you just rotate the image depending on the position on 3 dimensions. That's how I'm thinking about doing. And this is just going to be pretty much the same thing, regardless of what shader you're using, I think. So the main thing that matters for GL position is that the final value here has to be between -1 and 1, because those are normalized device coordinates, which OpenGL is going to take that and it's going to translate the normalized device coordinates to screen coordinates. So as long as this is between -1 and 1, then it should show on the screen, unless you. So the way that you do it is usually going to be multiplying by the camera. In this case, view size, which is a 2D camera, but I'm going to use a 3D. So you multiply the camera. If you're doing 3D visualization, you multiply the projection matrix, which is the matrix that contains the information to translate everything into 2D, translate from 3D to 2D. You multiply that by the camera, which is the camera position, and then you multiply that by the point, which is the position of the data you're going to send to the shader to actually create the geometrical structure you're trying to render. So you're sending one by one, and then you're doing this matrix multiplication to render. So if you do that, it's going to show whatever the camera is seeing. But it is kind of annoying to think about how to change here. But I'm getting better with time. So it is becoming less and less confusing on how to do this. And then the most complexity is on rendering the image is going to be on the fragment shader, because that's obviously what's going to determine what shows on or how the image shows, like all the different properties. But the main thing, I think, and the thing that I'm going to try to do is just this texture function here. Maybe it's this one. But the shader that I have there is from the other project that I was trying to reproduce, or I was trying to improve the other project, and then I went back and forth between different approaches. But I think I'm going to try to use this one initially, because it's a lot easier, obviously. So here they have the MVP, which is already, I think I'm gonna change this as well, but I'm trying to solve everything else first. Then I change this. But this is just the final result of multiplying everything already. So multiplying the projection and the view, which is kind of misleading here, but there's also, is MVP because the position could be viewed as the matrix that holds the state for the model you're trying to render, which is the local coordinates of the model. So the position is what creates the geometry in relationship to itself. The model matrix is the thing that holds the state for that geometry in relationship to the world state. And then this MVP is going to be, you can either do this, which is another thing that I asked ChatGPT, and I'm still not 100% sure because there's trade-offs, but one way is to multiply everything outside of the shader, and then you just send like this, the final result of multiplying the projection with the view and the model. And the other way is to just do everything inside of the shader. I think the trade-offs depend on how much, is mainly how much work done you want how much work you want the GPU to do or the CPU to do. Those are the trade-offs. Because the shaders are going to be done by the GPU, and whatever code you have outside is going to be done by the CPU. And then there's the synchronization between them because the data is flowing through OpenGL functions from the CPU to GPU. But I'm probably going to change this. So the way that I'm thinking about doing, and it's kind of annoying because I did this work on the other one, but then I ended up deleting by mistake the thing, which is not that hard to do, but it's kind of annoying. So I have to create a projection matrix, just get the coordinates. Maybe I'll do that now. And then you have to create another view, and I'm probably going to do it in a similar way that I'm doing on the other one, because then it's going to be easier to translate to the other one. We'll create the matrix view outside, then I'm going to change this to, instead of MVP, it's just going to be a projection matrix times view matrix, and then times the position. And I'm not going to do a model because I'm just trying to see if the thing is going to render or not. But if you do it like this, you have to set more values as well outside, because you have to find the location of this variable with OpenGL, then you cache the location on the class or struct. Then to set the variable, you have to call another OpenGL function, you pass the location of the variable, and then you pass the new value. So if I do like that, I have to change the other parts of the code as well. But then here, I'm just using this diffuse variable. This frag color is the out. So this is what I mean, is that right now, I think it's more recommended to use this variable, to do the color like this. So you do out, vec4, and then the name of whatever name you want, I think. But it's probably standard to use frag color, I'm not really sure. And then this is the color that OpenGL is going to use. This is a variable that OpenGL is going to use to create the image. So the diffuse is going to be the data for creating the image, which you get from the file, from the font atlas, and then doing all the other stuff. And this is going to be the coordinates of each point that you're also going to send with the data you send to create the position of the vertices. But the way that I was thinking that I used to do, that I thought it was more up to date, was to use gel frag color, but it seems like that's not the case now. So this is another way, and this is just a built-in variable. I'm not really sure if that's how maybe it's like this, yeah, but whatever. So what I'm trying to clarify now is on this main function here. So let me continue to show the pipeline. So they build the shaders. This is the part of the uniform block that I was talking about. So they allow you to have an option here that this is going to set all the uniforms at once. Then they hold the information for the uniforms on this shader, which is a struct. And they're getting the information based on some variables here somewhere. Maybe it's here. Or this one, get uniforms probably. So they store the values, and this is what I mean. This is going to be an OpenGL function, and you pass whatever program you're doing, you pass the name of the variable. And then each variable has a location inside of the shader, and you can use that location to tell OpenGL how to change the variables with whatever value you're passing through the buffers you create. So if you use the uniform block, you do this other stuff here that I don't understand very well, and I think I'm not gonna use now. Maybe later on. The reason why you do this is because more optimal, because you update everything at once. It's probably better, but it's more confusing. And then they call these other functions here to set everything in the beginning, and then they call this function, and this is the function that is gonna create the texture. So initially they pass the data as null here. So you're just creating for the first time the thing. But I believe that at some point, after, on the part that is confusing there, which I'm gonna show, they send the data from the file, if I remember correctly. So just call this OpenGL functions, you pass this GLUint, I think, which is just gonna be the value, is similar to VBO and VAO, which is just an int that keeps track of the buffer that you're gonna use to update the value of the variable. So there's caching this on this struct here, which I'm doing slightly different because I'm doing instead of the class. And then they don't have a class, but I'm doing, I believe, with this texture info here. So I hold the information for structuring the texture buffers on this thing here. This is going to be the ID that is used to bind the texture. And this is the other information. So as far as I understand, and I'm not 100% sure, but I think that is what you're doing is just creating a big image that is going to contain the entire text you need to render. Then you use the font atlas to get the information for each character, and then you loop over the text. Based on the text you have, you just check. Let's say you have, for example, the letter A inside of the text. So you're going to pass the letter A to some Fontstash function. That Fontstash function is going to call some STB function, and then based on that, it's going to check where this letter is inside of the font atlas. And once it figures that out, it's just going to return the information necessary to render that specific letter. Then based on that, you're going to get that information and you're going to translate that into vertices. Then after you get the vertices, you put them in some structure, and then you use that structure at the end to call OpenGL draw calls. That is you're gonna send all the information at once through the buffers you create in the beginning, and then OpenGL is just gonna draw everything at once. I think that's how it works, but I'm not 100% sure. So this is the translation that I did there from the function that they have to create the texture. So first to create the program, you cache the variables that are gonna be used. I'm caching inside of the class, calling these OpenGL functions. Then they create these fonts params, which comes from Fontstash as well, which is just going to contain the parameters for rendering the font atlas, I think. And they do another thing on NanoVG where they put these functions here on some other struct, but I think it's just because they are not using a class. So just translating these functions in the class itself and not inside of the struct. Then you allocate some memory and then initialize with these values. And then here, I'm updating the texture info with this font params info. So this is just getting the information for the font atlas, then calling OpenGL to bind texture. And then here, some functions that from OpenGL that are going to specify how you're going to create the colors inside of the image, as far as I understand. So you have different options where they do something that is called interpolation, because you're drawing one pixel at a time, and then there's a distance between the pixels usually, and because of that, you can have. I don't understand the nuances very well, but basically they do something that is called interpolation, which is figuring out based on the distance of the pixels what's going to be the gradient of the color between them. So let's say you have one pixel that the color is blue and the other one that the color is red. What happens between them? That's the kind of the thing. And the name of this is interpolation. So there's a lot of different configurations you can put here, and this is just specifying those configurations. I don't really care that much. And as far as I understand, this is the main one that creates the image. But I'm probably gonna. The way that they're doing it is that they create this thing first, with the no data, and I believe that on the update texture is I think they passed the actual data. Yeah. But I don't understand very well how it works. Maybe it's wrong here, so I'm gonna have to see. That's what makes sense. So in the beginning, they just create this to structure everything. Then they call this update texture at the end there on the function, on this other function that I'm working on now. And then based on that, they get the actual data from the file, which gets this is the struct that is used in the beginning there to contain the information. Is a struct from Fontstash that is going to contain the information for the font, rendering the font. So call this function, get the data for the file, I think. For the file, you add it in the beginning by calling the other function that adds the font, this function here. So I'm just caching the name of the font with the file path that has the value, that has the file path for the file. So add this font by calling Fontstash, they cache the information. Then later on you pass this to, you set the font here based on the ID. So figure out getting the font by the name that you cached there at the beginning, you pass through this sets the font, and then later on here you update the texture based on that font. So I think that's what the data is going to be. And I think that these calls here, they are creating the image based on the data. So they're just, but I'm not 100% sure how it works yet. So I guess this one thing that I have to understand now is at one moment, I think that they're updating the value of the thing that they use inside of the shader, inside of the texture function, inside of the shader, the variable that they need to actually create the image. I think they are doing that on the final draw call, which happens after these functions here, after these calls here. So basically, it's pretty much the same thing. I just simplify it. Then after they create and bind the texture, then it goes back, and then they create here. So this is the first part that just creates the initial stuff. I don't remember really well. Maybe they do it differently. I have to see what part they create the. I'm gonna search for this now. I think it's on the final cycle here. So they create, and maybe that's what I have to do. They create the structure of the buffers, but I think that this is gonna be different in the way that I'm doing, because since it's more generic, the way that they're doing, they have to create and bind the buffers in the rendering cycle because they don't know what they're gonna render. So that's the way that they structure everything. They just collect all the information that it is required to render inside the loop that they're creating with the begin frame and end frame. Once they have all the information, then they do this render flush here. And that's gonna use a struct, which I think is the call struct or something like that. That is going to create the buffers depending on all the information that they collected on anything that they want to render. Then based on that, they are going to set up these buffers here. That this is the variable location because they bind on a specific location. So 0 and 1. The 0 I think is the position, and the 1 is going to be the color. So they send both at the same time to the vertex shader. And it's based on the information that they collect before to create the vertices and everything that's going to be rendered. So I think this part is going to be different than the way that I'm doing, because I'm probably just going to structure them once, so I don't need to do them here. Then this is the part that I have to see. So this is probably going to be setting the data that they're going to set to. It's a uniform that is going to be used on the texture function to render the image. So I have to see what they're using here to set. So it seems like it's just 0. So maybe the way that it works is just it's gonna get the information from the GL text image functions. So it automatically gets from these functions here, I think. But I'm not 100% sure. Then after that, they decide what kind of call they're gonna make, which in my case I think is gonna be the triangles, because the type. This call is the struct that they use to hold the information of what's gonna be rendered. So I think my case is going to be this thing here, and then this just calls draw arrays, and then it passes the information that they got throughout the rendering cycle of the vertices and the count to draw all the triangles. So that's the stuff that I'm going to do now. I'll be right back. Talking about all this stuff really helps me clarify more how everything works. So yeah, I'm gonna talk about the main part of confusion that I have. So everything that I talked about so far happens before it happens on the beginning of the example. It's just to set up the information in the beginning. And then after that, they're gonna call that function draw label to draw everything. Or to set up the drawing, I think. The title is kind of misleading. It's not, they have the function called render text, but it's not really rendering text as far as I understand. So it's just setting up the reallocating memory. But all this stuff happens in the beginning here, which is this function here. So it happens inside of this function. So that's all this part here. And then after that, on this other function, which is draws the label, they're gonna have these functions here. These ones in the beginning are just gonna get information from the state, which holds the state, obviously, of the thing that is gonna be rendered. So you're just setting the values of the text. Then this is the main one that is gonna set up the vertices, I believe, to render the text. So there's a lot of things that are confusing actually. One of the things that is confusing is XForm. So this XForm is an array of 6 integers, I think, or 6 floats. And I believe, but I'm not, this is kind of thing that I'm not 100% sure, is that I believe that this is used to, because everything is going to be rendered in, I think that everything is rendered with 2 triangles, which creates a square. And that's going to be the square of the letter. So I believe that this holds the state of each character. And then based on this, it's going to perform the operations that are going to create the texture for each character. So just using this as a placeholder, as far as I understand, to render each character, but I'm not 100% sure. And then inside of this, it sets a bunch of things. This is the main thing that I'm trying to change now. And the thing that I don't, maybe this part happens before. I have to remember the part that's kind of confusing. I think it's on the render create. Is in the first setup function. This is the main function that creates everything. So they just hold this. These are the functions they're gonna use there throughout the loop. And I think it's on this one, yeah. So after they set up this stuff, this is the one that is kind of confusing. So this is the part that in the beginning that I got from them, this thing here, and just changed a little bit to create the shaders. This is the first time that they create the texture there, that they pass the node data. And the thing that I found kind of confusing is that they create these font images on the context. And this, as far as I understand, is gonna map it's just an array that keeps track of how many different textures you have inside of a context. So they are mapping, they are putting this on the index depending on the ID that they create to cache the textures. And this is the thing that is kind of confusing. So, and this is going to be 4. And it's pretty much the way that is working here. This text is going to be a struct, another struct that they use, which is the texture info. I just translated to, and I just removed the ID, but on their stuff, they have this ID variable here. It's int, I think, ID. And they use this ID here inside of this struct to keep track of the different textures they have using that font images variable. So this one here. And inside of this one, they just do this stuff here. So just mapping this text ID with the... they're doing this thing here. This texture ID is another variable inside of the context that's going to be... So it's kind of like a circular linked list. They are mapping this, are making this ID of the texture equal to the texture ID, which is a variable in the context. And then they are mapping the other variable in the context, which is the font images, to this text ID. So it just creates this circular linked list to keep track of the textures. And then they use this here instead of the render text function, which is inside of the other, inside of the main function that they use there to is this function here. So this is just setting up some information, and I believe that they use these variables here from Fontstash because they're gonna call some these Fontstash functions that are gonna create a quad. The quad is, as far as I understand, a struct that has the information for rendering the rectangle that is gonna contain the information for the letter. So they're just calling these functions, and then based on these functions, I think that what's gonna happen is that the information is going to be inside of the quads that are passed to this function. And then you use these quads here with this variable that they create. And I think that this is going to create a rectangle. It just creates an array of floats that has 8, which is going to be like the space that you use to put the information of how to render the character. And then they are calling these functions here. So they use this X form here to update the values of this each time, which contains the information to render the character. Then they set that with the vertices, which is an array. Because they're using C, they use a pointer, I think. And this creates this is the part that I'm gonna have to change. So here they are creating the index on the vertices, which is the array of quads that they're gonna have, or array of vertices they're gonna have to determine each point of the thing. So so on this here they're creating like that. So they create, and this is the thing that I'm gonna have to change. I think it's kind of confusing. So before they do this, they allocate some memory to the array. And because they allocate memory before, I think that they can do it like this, where they are creating the vertices struct, which is this type here, automatically here, based on the number of vertices that they calculate before on this function here. So as far as I understand now, all that this function does is to allocate memory to render to, so you're able to pass like this, because it's creating on the fly. It's creating the type on the fly, and then it's updating the vertex with this information here that comes from the quads that they get from Fontstash. So they are creating a character that holds is a placeholder for a state. Then they get the information from the quads, and then they use these two things to create the vertex inside of this function here. And then they are automatically mapping that with the array of vertices that they create, which is this verts, which is going to be the thing that is used, I think. So it's just an array of vertices that is created based on the information. And this, I think that they create here, and they pass this to another function to allocate. I think is the render tax. So this just allocates some space in memory. I think this is the part that I'm going to do differently. So they are reallocating here based on a cache they have, which is path. Which I'm probably not going to use. They use this thing here. And then this is going to keep track of the vertices and number. I think that the reason why they do like this is because they can render more things. That's the thing that's kind of confusing to translate, because I think I don't need this, since I'm only going to render the tags. I'm only going to render the label for each thing. So I think I can keep track of these variables inside of the label class instead of doing there. And then they make the cache equals to this, then return the vertices on the cache, which is this memory here. I think it's kind of confusing. Is this and vertices? Oh no, they're passing as, it's kind of confusing because of the name. But they are creating this based on they're getting the maximum. Is either going to be true, or if the text you want to render has less than 2 characters, I think, then it's just going to be true. If it's longer, because this is going to be the string length minus the string. I think what this is doing is just getting the place in memory that the string exists, because a const char pointer is the way that the string is created in C is just creating a pointer to a place in memory that's going to hold the information. So it's like a pointer to an array, and each value of the array is going to be a character. So this, as far as I understand, is going to be the first index of the character. So this operation here, what it's doing is just getting the length of the string from the initial place in memory that the string exists. It's just the length of the string, and here is getting the length, which is the text that you want to render, times 6. I'm not really sure why they say to be conservative, but I'm not. I think the reason why is because of each character is going to be 3 vertices, or it's going to be 6 vertices because it's 2 triangles for each character. So I think that's the reason why they are multiplying by 6 here. So you get the length of the string times 6. This is going to be the vertices count, and then based on this, if it is bigger than the one that you have cache already, then you're gonna reallocate memory based on that. That's how it works. Then you're gonna pass this one to this one. This one has some specifications. So this is the place where they get the font images that they created in the beginning there. So they're just getting the texture ID based on this other variable here that I don't remember really well. That's the part that I decided to try to simplify, because I don't think that. So now I'm trying to do just one image for label, and then if I want to allow more types of fonts for each label, then I think I can just create another function and just update everything based on the new label. That makes sense. So I think it's less confusing than doing like this. And then on this one, they're going to call these render triangles. This is the part that I'm not 100% sure, because I think, so the way that I'm doing there, I'm not using any of this now. I'm thinking about doing like this, but I'm not really sure if it's going to work. So they do it inside of the here, and after here, they call this function here, render tags. So if the number of vertices in the beginning is just going to be 0, because this variable here. But then after each point, they increase these vertices. So it's just increasing. It's just based on each point you have increases by 1. So it's just the count of the amount of points you have. So in the second iteration of this loop here, and this is looping over the tags and creating the quads based on the context. So based on this one here, you pass the tags you want to render to this function, and then I assume that what's gonna do is gonna get the information for each character, and then you just loop using this, and the Q here is gonna be the quad that has the information for rendering each specific tags. So based on this, they're gonna call this function inside of here. But the reason why I think that they do like this is just to allocate memory. It doesn't have anything to do with the vertices, the points themselves. But I'm not 100% sure. So the way that I think I'm gonna do it is to just create a vector of vertices here. And then instead of doing like this, I'm just gonna change here. So that's the stuff that I think I should do now. So this function is this other one here. And then on here, they're gonna allocate memory to this call, which is a struct that they're. So those are the 2 things that I'm trying to do. So one is understand everything that they're gonna use when it actually gets time to render everything. And the other, if it is necessary or not to get the vertices. So I'm gonna write down there. There's two things that I not clear now. Is so the vertices, I think that the intuition is correct. So the only thing that matters is just I'm thinking I'm gonna change that thing. So I create a label, but this is the thing that I'm not really sure. Like, what is the best way to translate? Because I'm gonna have to create 4 different labels if I do like that, or I can create a loop inside of. So instead of doing calling this function here, I can, or maybe I change in this function here. Because if I use a vector, I can't access the vector with the index. I have to place. So maybe I don't even need these end vertices here. I think I don't need the vertices. So I just remove. I remove from here, but I still increase them because I need to know the number, obviously, to do the draw calls later, I think. But I don't need to pass this stuff here since I have on the class. I can just in place, and then the std vector is automatically gonna reallocate the memory. So I think that's probably the best thing to do. So instead of passing here, I initialize inside of the class here. Yeah, but this is something that I have to think about. So the question that I have to clarify is whether or not, from vaguely from what I remember in a JSON video, he talks about the difference between in place back and pushback into a vector. And I think in place back, he recommends more in place back, but I don't remember exactly why. But I have to see what's gonna happen. So the idea that I have here is instead of creating this here, I just create this variable here. And then after creating this variable, I put the values, and then after doing that, I place that into the verts that I have there, in place back. But the thing that I'm not sure, obviously, is what's gonna happen. I think that if I do it like this, it's just gonna copy the information inside of the vertices, but I'm not really sure. It's because of it's not a function here. So yeah, okay, if it doesn't copy, then what I'm gonna have to do is just create a pointer to, because then if I create a unique pointer or a share pointer, probably easier to do is just share pointer. Then it's just gonna automatically allocate memory on the heap, and then that means that the memory is not gonna be, this variable is not gonna be lost after the function is executed. So this is the issue, that if this is deleted after the execution of the function, then obviously it's gonna be a segmentation fault, because then I'm not gonna have access to the variable after placing to this vector here. So I have to make sure that it still exists. Another thing that I could do is just use the other stuff there, which is the node discard, things like this. But I'm not really sure if that makes sense or not. But I think using this makes more sense if I was gonna return the variable and then use outside. Because what this does is to tell the compiler to not delete this the value that is going to be returned for the function after the function is executed. So I think it makes more sense to allocate on the heap. But I'm gonna ask this. And so here, I think that this is the struct that they're going to use instead of the other function. So these are the other questions is what's so one is based on the function there, they're just setting the uniform to 0, which I don't understand very well for the variable that's going to be used inside of the texture function. So I'm not really sure if I need to. So maybe study or review. I'm going to review the other. So I need to understand the relationship between and this other one here. Because I need to understand if this function here is going to update the value on this one. I think that's the only thing that makes sense to me. So they're creating the vertices, and when they call the function at the end there to update the texture, then they update the value that was set here in the beginning with the actual image. And then because you do it like this, then you don't need to set the value of the uniform on the shader. But I'm not really sure if that makes sense or not. This one, I think, is the easiest one. I think that the way that they do is just by using the call triangle offsets that they set inside of this other function here. So this is the variable. So when they call that render text, they're calling this function inside of the render text. And then this one is reallocating memory. Based on the number of vertices, they are reallocating memory here on this thing here. Yeah. And then inside of the context that they're using, they are keeping track of this. They reallocate and then they update the value of the variable based on the vertices that they got before inside of the other loop there. So inside of this loop, they create the vertices, then they call this function. And I think this is the reason why they call this function here, is just to update the memory that the vertices are using. So they create the vertices here inside of this thing, and then they allocate here. And this other one I don't remember really well, but I think it's just to allocate memory for the texture as well. If I remember correctly, it was calling this thing here. And for some reason, I thought that it's not necessary to do it. Yeah, I think I deleted it from here. So it is just related to memory, I think. Hmm. Or maybe I need to put that there as well. Let me see. Yeah, I think I translated that into the other function to update texture. It's similar, but it's not the same though. I think this is gonna be the one that I put here. I think it's the same. Yeah, what I did was just replace. So I put them. So I replaced the code of this function inside of this one. So I put them together on the same one. So I do think that I have to put this on the other thing there. Oh no, this is a different one. Oh, it's inside of this one that they use the other one. So they're doing it here. Oh, I comment it out. Yeah, I think the reason why I comment this out is because I wasn't sure if it's necessary, because I wasn't sure if it's just because of memory or not that they're doing this. But now I think I have to do it because they are calling the same function there. So maybe what I should do is just put this, call this. This is what I mean. It's kind of annoying because like of the nuances of this, because it's not very clear on my mind exactly how they are constructing the actual character information based on Fontstash. But probably because I think that this is just related to uh, keeping track on the context of the texture that is going to be used, but it's not necessary to render the actual thing. It's just because they're gonna like because it's a broader library and they might use the information from the context. If they have different textures for doing different things, then I think that this is necessary. But I think for my thing, there is not necessary. Yeah. But I think I have to call this there because it's the same. I think I understand what they're doing here. So probably what's going on is that this function here gets the data for the atlas. Then they use this thing here to signal the positions of the character, I think. The reason why it's kind of confusing is because Fontstash does the thing under the hood, I think. So inside of this loop here, you don't see, but the characters are being updated because of the iteration here. Yeah, because you were initializing based on the text here. So I assume that each iteration is going to be related to each character. So, and the context, the font context is going to keep track of that. I think that's why it's kind of confusing. So when you call this function here at that point in the rendering, in the loop, then because you have the context here, it's already going to know what character the thing is at because the context keeps track of that. I think that's what's happening. So it gets the data for the character, then makes these variables here, and based on the texture width, is going to create this thing here. So I think it makes sense to put there. So the way that the reason why I think that they are putting in the end here is because this is looping until the character before the last character. So it makes sense to update here, I think. So each iteration. Yeah, so this is what's going on. So here, but I'm not really sure if this is. So this breaks the. This breaks the thing, the loop. Hmm. Like it's weird because I'm not really sure if this, like how this interacts with the other loop here. So what is happening is that inside of here they're trying to find if the glyph for the character exists. So the glyph is going to be the thing that's on the image here that contains information. But if you're using a font atlas that doesn't have, so for example, let's say you're using a font atlas that has English characters, but doesn't have Greek characters or something like that, then if the text you're trying to render has a Greek character, it's not going to have the information for that character. So this is what's happening here. So it checks to see if it has the glyph, and if it doesn't, it breaks the loop. But that's the thing that is kind of confusing, because then I think it's just skipping over the character probably. So it's not going to render the character if it doesn't exist on the glyph. That's how yeah, it doesn't exist. If the glyph for the character doesn't exist, they just break the loop and then move on to the next character. But I think if the character exists, then it's gonna call this for each character, which makes sense, I think. So what this is doing is just updating the. So it's just doing one image at a time, I think. That makes sense. I think I understand now. So I was thinking about it in the wrong way. So the way that I was thinking about it is that you're gonna get the font atlas, and then you're gonna get all the information to render all the tags at once, and you're gonna do that all at once, which is kind of what's happening. But the thing that is confusing is the index here. But I think that the index is like, so the way that I think is working is that in the beginning there you're just creating a place in memory, a buffer for OpenGL that is going to contain the entire data of the image that you're going to send. And then inside of here, you're just filling the blocks inside of the bigger block of the image. So because this is a sub image inside of the main image that they create in the beginning, and that's why in the beginning is null here, I think. So you just create the structure of the entire thing. So this height and width is the height and width of the entire text, I think. And then inside of this thing here, you're gonna, for each character you create, you're gonna call this other function here. And then this x, y, width and height is gonna be related to that specific character. But this is kind of weird because here is texture width, so that doesn't make sense because the texture width is the same as the other one. So I don't think. So maybe the other one is just a template. It doesn't do anything. So I think that the first call that they do is just to check if OpenGL can create the thing. There is a comment here somewhere, if I remember, that they say something that is just to. Some platforms does not allow to have samples to unset textures. That's why I think. So in the first call, so it isn't what I was thinking about. It's the same concept, but not exactly the same. So it's not like they're creating the whole thing in the beginning. They're just making this call in the beginning with no data to see, because OpenGL is not going to allow you to update the texture later if you haven't done a texture in the beginning, I think. So first you call this to set the texture, because some platforms do not allow the samples to unset texture. Create empty one which is bound when there's no texture specified. And then after all the characters, then they're going. This is the one that is actually gonna create the image for each character. So you're just doing a bunch. For each character, you're just doing a call and then passing the data for that character. And then the width of the and the height is going to be the width and the height of each character, not the whole texture. And that's what's happening. But it is kind of weird here though. Like I don't understand. Because here is 0 and then here is this thing. So why not make it 0 either way if it's going to be... It doesn't make a lot of sense for me. This also doesn't make sense. So I guess this is just related to the other stuff that they are doing. So this is probably just to keep track of the other context or other data structure, or this fragment here, to update all uniforms at once. Ideally, I would avoid doing this because I think it's not related to what I'm trying to do. It's just for rendering other stuff. But I'm not 100% sure. And now that I think about it, this other stuff is probably just true. Oh, it is different as well. Hmm. I think it's not the same function. It's a different one. Huh. So now I don't understand why they... Like, it makes sense that they're calling this one inside of the loop there because it creates each texture, but then why call the other one outside of the loop? That doesn't make a lot of sense, right? Yeah, I think I didn't put this stuff here. Hmm. Because I thought that this is related to the other thing, the other management of data that's not related to what I'm trying to do. Also, they called this one before this. Hmm. Oh, so I think this function is wrong. I'm gonna have to do it again. So up until here, because probably... Hmm. I'm not sure though. Because it's gonna be the same thing. They're probably using the same names there. Here. So all that I did was get the code for this function and then just paste here and simplify. So I think the x and y is gonna be probably the same thing. Let me think about this. But here they're passing no as well. It's kind of weird. I think this is not related because this is gonna be just for... Is that the stuff that I was saying is that This is just initializing it's the same thing that they did there in the beginning, where they initialize an empty one, just because in some platforms, OpenGL doesn't allow you to set on an empty thing. So this is just in case you have more than, yeah, this is not part. So it's just in case you have more than one image. And the image is going to be the atlas you're using. So if you want to support multiple fonts on one context, but the thing is, I think the way that I'm doing, I can do it on a separate way. So yeah, I think that it is correct. I don't need this part here because I already did this in the beginning. So the only thing that they are doing is this flush thing here, which is this one. And I think that's, so I have to see if this one is correct or not. So the thing that is kind of weird to me is this X value here. Doesn't make a lot of sense. They're just passing X and Y here. So maybe I don't need to do this thing here. I don't understand why they did this thing in the beginning. It doesn't make sense to me. So unless I'm missing something. But this variable is initialized here. Maybe it's something to do with the memory. So just pointing X to the... But it doesn't make a lot of sense. And then they're making it equal to 0 at some point. But maybe this is the part that... Oh, it's because of this. Hmm. And so they have some other conditions depending on what kind of context you're. So there are different ways you can access OpenGL functions. So the way you access OpenGL functions is just by creating function pointers or variable pointers, I think. Because OpenGL is going to be loaded at runtime. So after you compile everything, once you're going to run, the way that it's going to work is that you're going to communicate with Windows, and then Windows is going to have some functions to find the OpenGL context available. And then you're going to interface with that with pointers that you usually get from a library. So there's different kinds of libraries you can use to access the context. And I think one of them is this one, but I'm using Glad, which is another one. So I deleted this because I'm not going to use. So I think that's why they make like this, but in my case, not necessary, because in some situations you're gonna have a different value here. But then if it is this, it becomes 0. And then they start. So let me see the Y as well. Still don't understand very well though. Because the thing is, I'm gonna ask ChatGPT if initializes. That's the thing. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. I'm trying to understand why they do it like this. Oh, because they're passing here. So it doesn't make sense. So maybe I should just leave it like this. So this function probably is gonna do something with these values, and then it makes sense to be there. I'm gonna comment these out, but I think the other ones should probably leave like this. So this is the other thing. But I think I'm supposed to use the IW and I with here instead of W and with. Now let me think. It's passing this to the other function, but then why is using this? Hmm. This doesn't make sense to me. I guess it's just so you're able to call the function, probably. I'm gonna leave it like this, but kind of weird. So let me see if the back there. So the only thing that this is doing is just calling this function here, which is the same update texture that I have here. And what is the other one? So I think in my situation is the same because the only reason why these functions are different is because of the other stuff that they do with the context. Yeah, it's the same function. So I just removed all the other stuff here. So I think it is correct the way that I'm doing there. So you do one at the first time to set the thing with no values, and then for each character you call this function, and then you call this one, which actually sets the data. I think that's how you do it. So now I'm gonna change the function for the. I'm gonna change this function for the vertices here. Yeah. So let me think how this. So this is the question that I have to ask there. So the way that I'm gonna do it, I just store the information inside of the variable, inside of the class, and then I increase the inverts here because I'm probably gonna have to use this to. But I think I have to change this as well because maybe I don't. It's kind of weird that they are making equal to 0 here as well. Because this is the thing that like I don't think they're using. They're not gonna use this verts to render in their case because they use the other struct. But I think for my thing, it's probably better to. So I just comment this out here or just remove this part because I'm probably gonna need the amount of calls that I'm gonna do is just gonna be inverts. I think the end. So what I should probably do is just convert this into a variable there in the class and remove this value. I'm gonna do that. The only thing that I'm not sure is So I have to verify if what is the relation between this C verts and the N verts. I think the C verts is probably not necessary as well, because it's just related to memory. Yeah, so I think I can remove this thing here, because the information for looping over the characters is already going to be inside of these functions here. So like I don't need to keep track of the length of the thing. I think the only reason why they do that is because of memory. So I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna comment it out in case it doesn't work. Another reason why it's kind of it's not. I'm thinking about this stuff is because if I have a situation just like the last time where I do everything and then I try to render and it doesn't give any errors but it runs, then it's gonna be very difficult to figure out what part was wrong. So I'm trying to make sure that there's less things that can go wrong before I do that. So I think that the way that I'm gonna do it is just hmm. I'm gonna put this Zen birds there in the class. I have to think about whether or not it's necessary to. I think I have to do one more call here, but I'm not really sure because I think this render tags is just for memory. So, but it can be the thing that it probably is the thing that I was talking about is that I have to figure out what is the relationship between this function, if there is any relationship between this function and these vertices here, or this one is just used to make sure you have space to render the next points, because they're using the same thing, the same structure, I think, on the context to render everything. So they just make sure that at the end they reallocate the memory here, because I do think that if that's the case, then it's not necessary. But it could be something else, which is that this just loops over until it gets to one character before the final one, and then this one just finishes. So I think that's not the case probably. So probably I'm gonna try like this, I think. Just comment this out and then figure out, because it's the easiest way. If it doesn't work, then I think about it. The other thing that I'm not really sure is whether or not it's necessary to do after here, because this increases the value and returns the previous one, but it doesn't make a difference. And from a video from Jason, remember, he recommends to use the pre-increments because it's less confusing and more performant, I think, whenever you can. But this is, as far as I've seen from examples, it seems that the most useful place to do this post increment operator is whenever you want to loop over a string or an array, and you want to reassign the value of the array. Because then when you do that, so for example, if you do like ID like this, and then you reassign, then what's going to happen is you are reassigning the value of the current index, and then you're incrementing for the next loop already. So it's just more convenient. But I think besides that, you should probably use the pre-increment as often as you can. Yeah, so let me ask the in place back thing. And after I do that, I'm gonna create another function here that is gonna be the draw label, and just gonna copy the whatever functionality they have on the flush there and try to figure out how to replace the variables that I need. So I'm gonna ask I'll be right back. Yeah, so I think this is fine. Well, the other thing that I have to change is, so the way that they are doing is that based on the example there, is just rendering, or is just calling the function, and then the render tags or draw label function, and then they do this functionality there inside of that function. But I think what I can do is just pass this. Oh, this is another thing. Is the x and y here? I can just copy from the example, I think. And they use here. So what I can do is just on the initialization of the class, I call this. I should be here, I think. I think here is gonna be whatever position you want the text to be. Oh, the other annoying thing is gonna be I have to change I have to see how they update the values. The position doesn't matter because it's gonna be the buffer. And the one that matters is the other one that creates. But I'm probably gonna have to change the shader because it's not gonna show there. I have to set this value here. It's kind of annoying. Maybe what I can do in the beginning is just do the position. I think that's what I'm gonna do. So I have to make sure that I pass here values between 0 and, or -1 and 1. And it's kind of annoying because it's gonna be based on this thing. I guess I can, the easiest thing to do is to print these values here. I have to print the final values, the ones that are on the actual vertex. Then if they're outside of -1 and 1, I just do whatever math to put them inside, like divide them by whatever. Because after I do that, I'm gonna have to do like the correct way, but it's gonna be kind of annoying. Because what I'm gonna do is just get from the other project, and the other project's not the same format, and there's a bunch of calculations I have to do to create the matrix of the projection with the correct values and the view as well. So I'm just gonna put 0 because I'm gonna have to change this as well. Hmm. So what I can do is just, I'm gonna change this later, but I have to remember this. Like what I'm gonna do is just inside of the function there, I'm just gonna add here. So this x and y I'm gonna change anyway. So let me think how I'm gonna do this. Maybe actually it doesn't matter. Let me see. X, Y. And because this is result of this, so I think this x and y doesn't matter that much. So I have to see. Obviously, the problem here is that I'm gonna do it in 3 dimensions, but the way that they structure everything is just through 2 dimensions. So I'm trying to think about what is the best way to, because this x and y here from their example is gonna be, I assume is the position of the where you want the tag should be. But I need to add the C thing there. And so they're just passing this and this. So I'm not really sure if it's the absolute position of the text or if it's the... It has to be the absolute position. So the question is how to change or one thing that I can do is just put always the same X and Y here. And the way that I'm going to change the position of the object on the stuff that I'm doing is by using the object 3D class. So I'm just going to set the position based on the model matrix of the class. But then I'm thinking about, because probably these ones are the relative position of the object. And then after I set the relative position, then all the other movements are going to be based on the model matrix. So, but I have to think about, because I do need to incorporate the z-index, I think, somehow. This is the problem because maybe I don't need to put the z-index here, just put the x and y. And then I change the z on the model outside. Because the issue is if I add here on this function, the value of the z, then it's a problem because it's gonna fuck up the image, I think. Because these points are in relationship to the local coordinates that creates the image. And because the image is in 2D, it has to be 2D here, I think. So these vertices here are gonna eventually be replaced on the shader there. Are gonna be these values, the value position here. So the question is if I change this to 3, because I'm gonna have to change the buffers as well if I change this, because I structured the buffers to be 3. So if I change this to 3 and I change this function here, if it's gonna mess up the image. I guess I can try. So I'm gonna do that. I'm just gonna add z here, and I'm gonna try. If it doesn't work, I do it the other way, then I figure out. And then I'm gonna make this x and y and z on. I'm gonna just put arbitrary values now here, but on the other project I'm gonna make it based on the position of the object 3D. So it's just gonna be 25 here. And the way that you build the buffers depends on that, obviously. So here, this one I got from the GL tags. But basically, you get the location when you build the shader of the variable. Then you put the location here. You enable the attributes. Then you put the location here. Then this is the size of the whatever you want to pass, which is going to be related to the vector size. So in this case, vector 3D. So if I change there in the pass x, y, and change the variable inside of the shader, I have to change here as well. It should be 2. But this is going to be 3 because it's 3 floats. I think it's 3. Yeah, 3. I don't think I have to do times float here. I think it's just the, but I'm not really sure. Yeah, I think because it knows that the type is float, it does the multiplication. But then here you have to multiply. And then here's going to be the offset. So on this one is going to be 0. And this one is going to be the size of the position you're sending, because I think this is the stride actually. Yeah. So this is the stride, which is how many to the right is going to go. So on the position attribute is going to start on the 0. And then because I'm going to send two variables at the same time, it's going to get the value of the next position, it has to be 5 floats to the right of the array. And then you specify this on here. So it's 5 times float. It's 5 times float. So it starts at the 0, then the stride starts at the 0 index, and this one starts at 3, at the 3 index, or 3 floats after the array starts, because that's going to be the value of the other variable you want to send. And it's the same thing to the stride, because it's going to be like interpolated between the two values. And the size is true here. So I guess you don't need to set the. I'm gonna focus now on the last part. That's strange, I think. And so now the question is, this is the kind of weird thing, because I'm building the buffers here, so I don't remember really well. Because I think that when you do the draw triangles, it's already gonna send the data. You don't have to specify. But then how are the points related? So let me think about this. So first I have to see. I'm gonna look into the other function that they use to render everything, but I have to see if they have to update the uniform, because I realize now that I'm gonna send the data for the two things, but one of the data is just the coordinates of the points. And you send it together with the data for the position of the vertex. Hmm. The question is whether or not. So I'm gonna have to change from the main function that they're using there, because the information is here. So the question is how I'm gonna send the verts. How I'm going to use the verts vector to send the data to the buffer. Because I think the u and v are the coordinates of the the other variable that you pass together with the position to the shader that is going to be used to inside of the texture function inside of the shader. I think these uv coordinates are the ones. Are these ones here. So this is uv. Then pass here. This is used inside here. So the question is, how do they set this one? But I think based on, so let me just create the function. Or maybe I should put this like inside of the, because I'm not doing any transformation. If I get to the point where drawing nothing shows, then I'm probably gonna stop the stream and I'm gonna do the change the shader and do the boring part to see if that's the problem. I can use the render doc thing to see if the texture is correct. So the idea is this is gonna be a function inside of the mesh on the other project. And then once I call the function, I'm just gonna call the constructor of this and it's just gonna set up everything. Then inside of the loop, I'm gonna do the stuff that should render. This is the thing that I was thinking about before. So I was thinking about like, so instead of in placing the label vertices, I can just format in whatever thing OpenGL requires. So like do vector floats, for example. I think that's probably better. And I just in place everything like one by one. I think that makes sense. And so it just puts a 0. So the only thing that makes sense that is getting from the other the text sub image thing. I'm not sure if there's a better way to do OpenGL, but this is the kind of thing that I didn't like about it. It's that it's kind of hard to think about the connection of the functions and at what time, like, to remember or to structure the correct time to do everything. So this this is gonna be the view. Hmm. So they are setting here probably. I didn't look into this function. Because here they are passing the index there, I think. The call is gonna be stored here. So I have to write this down, I think. So they are storing on the M calls. So I have to figure out what is gonna be the call here. But I assume that's gonna be the image that they create or the texture that they create at each part of the rendering cycle. Or the loop there that I was talking about. On the updates texture. Say, what's up, man? I'm trying to think about what is the best way to write this down. I'm trying this. So these are the things that I need there. So I need to figure out how to convert the inverts into this. I convert the inverts into this and figure out. There's probably an easier way to do it in the way that I'm doing. Because obviously I can just loop over the inverts, or I can just send all inverts at the same time. But then I would have to figure out how to send all the images at the same time. The way that I think they're doing is just, but maybe I think they are sending one by one. Not really sure. Hmm. And this is kind of annoying because I have to go to the other functions to figure it out. Let me see this one first. Yo, thanks, man. Hmm. So they're updating the fragments variable. This was the concern that I had because now I'm gonna have to think about all the other parts there. They're kind of confusing. So I thought that I could avoid using this frag here, but because this is related to the other stuff on the context, but I think I'm gonna have to understand that. This I don't think I need because it's always gonna be the same atlas that I use. So the main thing is this function here. I'm gonna go back to see what the image is. So the image is the call. Maybe it does matter. Oh no, call image. I don't know what's I have to. So I'm not really sure if triangle offset is the it's gonna be the. So maybe I should look into the function from OpenGL. Yeah, so I should look into GL draw arrays. Specifies the starting index in the enabled arrays. Hmm. What does that mean though? What is the starting array? Is it the array that you set up on the buffer? No, that wouldn't make sense because like in the first part there, I still don't have the data. I am thinking about changing this later, but I'm not really sure. Because I want to make it work first, then I would think about well like here yeah, here it doesn't have any data, that's the thing. So it's just setting up the structure. Yeah, OpenGL is gonna use to read the buffers. So I imagine that the array has to be the thing they pass, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. the enabled array. So it should be the question is how, what point is using the vertices? That should be this stuff here. Yeah. And so here is, this is where I'm confused, because on the other project, the way that I'm gonna do it is just to call this before the rendering cycle. But here's where you pass, so you enable the vertex array here, and then you pass the data here. And then there is gonna be the index. So they're setting up here everything with the whole data, and that's where they pass the vertices here at the buffer data here. So this is where it matters. Alright, so now it makes sense. So you pass the whole data and then you render one at a time based on the image that you store here. I think that's how it works. So I have to figure out, and this is going to be on the render tags. So the first thing to figure out is locate this fragment, what the fragment is going to be. And that's going to be annoying to update. But I think I don't need to. So the thing that I'm trying to clarify as well, or I'm going to search probably, is obviously I think I can draw everything at once, but then the problem is the images. If I want to draw everything at once, I think I have to find another way to set up the images, which is going to be annoying. So I think the way that they are doing is just storing the image inside of this call. Or they're using the same atlas, but then they're just passing one at a time. So the image specifies, why do they use the image here? I think it's on this one. So they use the image to set the uniform each time. This is another thing that I can probably, if the image is the atlas, which I think it is, because it's the texture that is set in the beginning there, then I think I can set only once, because I'm always going to use the same atlas. I think the reason why they have to do it like this is because they allow for different fonts. Then the trade-off obviously is that if you want different letters to have different fonts, then it limits you, because I'm always going to use the same font for the text. But I think that is easier if I do it like this, and then I can just break down the text from the outside, and then based on the differences in text, so like I can compose the text with multiple different texts. That makes sense. And then for each one, I put the logic of which font to use based on the type that the text is, for example. Yeah, but this will probably be the same thing actually. But I don't think that matters that much, to be honest. It's like a micro optimization thing. So because the text is just for the label, so it doesn't matter that much. It's probably gonna be the same color, same style for each node. So, yeah, but it's good to think about for later for other stuff that I want to do. But I think for now I should simplify as much as possible and just try to do it. So I have to see what's this fragment variable. So I think it's just for the UBO that is used. Hmm. So maybe I don't need to call that function. It's just calling and then I can send all the data at once. So the biggest question I have is the relationship between the. I need to search for the functions there, the functions related to the image. That's the biggest confusion. Fuck. I'm gonna search for the sample thing or the texture. I want to find the frag to see how they're using. Hmm. So is this variable here probably, or this one? Depending on what kind of, if you use the uniform buffer, then it's this, and then it probably allows you to set all these variables at the same time. I don't think I need to use it though. So the main thing to figure out is just the other stuff. It's just the so the first thing is to figure out what is the best way to structure this. So I can pass. It's probably gonna be floats, and then I just place one float at a time. Then after that, I have to figure out this. This is probably the main ones. So I don't need a call image. It's just gonna be the yeah. I don't need this thing here. It's the triangle offset and the triangle counts. I need to know if I can send everything at once as well. I think I can draw everything at once. So just send n verts here. And then the offset's gonna be 0. I'm gonna search on the other projects to see the values there. Maybe it's a waste of time. So the first is the start, which is gonna be 0. And so I think that the offset is 0. And the counts is n verts. I think I can do it like this. And the only thing to do is this one. But it makes more sense for me to put this on the other function. So I'm gonna delete this. It makes more sense to put all this stuff on the other one. And just do the draw here. To put on the build vertices. So I'm gonna fix this first. But I'm gonna go back. I'm gonna clarify if it is what I'm thinking about. So I think it comes from the render tax on this one. I have to understand this one. And the counts and verts. So it doesn't matter. So it is what I was thinking about. Because this is just going to be the offset from the beginning of the array. And I think the reason why they do it like this is because they're going to draw a bunch of different things at the same time using the same vertex array. But since I'm only going to draw the text, then I don't need the offset in the beginning. So it's just going to be 0 and then the number of vertices. So the only thing that I have to figure out is what is the best way to structure this. So I'm gonna get the name of the. I think if I do data here, it works. Data is a method from member function, whatever you want to say it, from std vector that just gets all the data inside of the vector. But I'm not really sure. I think because of this, it's gonna know that each element in the data is this size. And so I think this is everything. So I'm gonna compile like this first and run to see if there's any errors. And reference local variable. Hmm. That sucks. So let me think. It might be this thing here. I, the thing is that I'm not even drawing there, so maybe it's no. It can be because it's not is a segmentation fault. It's probably something outside of OpenGL, but it could be something. Or maybe is this the problem? Oh, but it couldn't be because it has a value here, so it doesn't matter. The thing that makes most sense is the in place back there. I'm not too sure if that supposed to give an error on. The easiest thing to do is do this. Let's see if it works. I think the only thing that makes sense to me is to be this function here because of the stuff that I was talking about. Hmm. So it has to be this function. And then the only problem is why, where. So I guess I can do this. Let's see. But that wouldn't make sense. That's the problem. Because if the problem is this, then it would give us segmentation faults somewhere else, I think. I'm gonna put checkpoints as a way of knowing. I'm gonna do one at a time. That's weird. Maybe it's this thing. So now it shows. Well, I'm not creating the tags, I think. So the first thing you should do is probably I have to think about whether or not this is good or not, because like what is gonna happen with the memory in the context of the overall thing. I don't know. Let me unlock this. Nice. So now, and now let me test the other thing. Hopefully it works. I knew that it was gonna be annoying, but I was expecting to be done with this sooner. Huh, nice. At least it's showing something. So I think it should be working probably. It's just the values of the position probably. So I think that's so good thing to do is just to see on the on render doc if it just see the texture, because then I'm gonna know if the problem is the view or the actual structure. If it works, then the next thing that I'm gonna do is just separate the logic and then try to simplify as much as possible. And the thing is that I'm already passing at 0.5 the positions, so it should be between -1 and 1. So, but the thing is, it depends on the values. So I guess one thing that I can do is just to go in the function there to see what is the magnitude of the values of the vertices that the phones is creating, because the sum is gonna be bigger than -1 and 1. And that's probably the issue. It says not showing a fragment shader here. I don't understand why though. Incorrect API usage. No vertex shader bounds at raw. Hmm. And it doesn't make a lot of sense to me. It might be because of this thing here that I was confused by. But I do think that it is creating the view. 'Cause the color is white, the thing is white there. Hmm. And it seems like I'm binding everything correctly because this is on the class and I'm creating this on the beginning there. Like base this function create text buffer and create the texture, then the text buffer. And then this binds the VAO and builds the structure here. This is what I was thinking about doing after seeing if it works, is to move the logic of this logic here to here. Because I don't think it makes sense. But I would have to change the order there. So first you build the vertices, then you create the text buffer. It's becoming more clear on my mind, so I think I'm on the right direction. And what I have to do is just replace this stuff with this. I think I'm gonna do this now, and then I'm gonna change the order there. But the error that I get there doesn't make sense to me. 'Cause I don't think doing this is gonna solve. It's probably something related to the way that I'm setting up the images. But the weird thing about this is that if that was the case, then it shouldn't be drawing anything in the first place. It should give me an OpenGL. But I'm not printing as well. So maybe what I can do, the easiest thing to do is just print before I change anything. Just print before the images. I'm pretty sure it did that at some point, and it wasn't giving me any error. And now it's showing something. No, it doesn't show anything here. So the problem is the draw call, I think. So there is an error on the image. It could be something else though, because I think it only prints on the order of the execution. So if you put the statement before, then it doesn't show. So the way that I've been doing is just putting this, like just putting checkpoints and then seeing. It's probably not the best, but it works. So it's happening before. Hmm. Maybe it's because I changed the way that I was doing this here. So there should be more than one error, I think. So there's probably an error because of this. But to me, it doesn't make sense because like I think the way that I was thinking there is right. Like this is already gonna be after I call this function the end vertex is just gonna be the number of vertices. So and this like there isn't much that could be wrong. The only thing that could be wrong is this thing here, I think. It has to be the image there, I think. So I think this calls here the binds image bind texture. This is the call that is gonna bind the images, the font atlas to this. So probably if I use only one font, and the thing is I'm not 100% sure if the way that I'm thinking about it is clear. That's the confusing part because if the way that it works is that you use the font atlas, uh, only one image, and then with that one image you render everything, then I think I don't need to update here. I could just do one at the end here. But if you do need one image for each character, but if that was the case, then it wouldn't make sense here. That's the thing. Because then you would make more sense if I had to go. Maybe that's the issue, like because they are doing it on a loop, and they're setting this each time for each call here. So if I do the way that I'm doing now, probably I would have to like instead of doing this, I would have to do the loop there with the loop over the end verse and do one call at a time, and then just increase this by I plus 3. So it would be I, and then after that I would do I plus equals 3. Just set the offset as it reads but I don't think that's very good. So what I have to understand is how to structure things so that I can use the same image regardless, I think. That's probably the way to solve this. So probably what's happening is that it works on the first time that it draws, but then for the other ones it doesn't. I'm not pretty sure. And it's weird that it's giving an error here. I think I'm gonna stop streaming soon as well, and I'm gonna solve the rest off stream. Hopefully it works. I spent a bunch of time on this already. So the only thing that makes sense is it should be here somewhere. Maybe it's one of this. Maybe this thing. Oh, it's because of the MVP. That's why. Oh, still. Hmm. It's invalid operation. I was getting some error like this on another version of this thing that I was trying to do, and it was something along here, but I don't remember really well. But from what I remember, I fixed that, so it shouldn't be giving any errors. I'm just gonna try to find where the thing is. It might be this thing here. I'm not really sure what's the point of this. It binds the frag crawler to location 0, but I'm not really sure if this is necessary. Probably is this. Hmm. I can change this function as well to put a line where the thing is, but I I don't want to deal with that. No. So the only thing makes sense is this things. That should be this probably. Oh, it's because it has to be this thing, not the other. Yeah, so I think because I changed the that was probably the issue. So I changed a bunch of things along the way. Then I don't understand how it was working. And I think I don't need this because I'm gonna send with through the vertex buffer, so is not so uniform. That's the thing. I'm gonna comment this out. Probably not gonna work here. Yeah. Still invalid. It's weird. I think it was something like this before that I had an error. I don't remember. No. So it has to be this. I think it is one of these, but it doesn't make sense. Valid operation. Hmm. The easiest thing to do is just look into this one. Maybe I have to do with the disk one. Not really sure why though. Maybe it's because it's inside of the constructor that I'm calling this. I have to think about how to ask a question that is gonna allow me to clarify this. It's probably easy, just it's still an issue. So maybe it's something else. It has to be this call here. If I use like this. Thing is, on the other one, I remember that it does initialize it as the program, but then for the other ones it just passes the variable. So I'm not really sure why I can't use there. Let's see, to this. Oh, link status on reference local variable. Oh, it's because I comment the thing out. I does have a program ID. It has to be just because I'm using this inside of the constructor, but I want to understand why though. I'm pretty sure that this is after the... And so this initializes glad with the GL of W, OpenGL context, and the constructor is here. So obviously, the easiest thing to do is to do this outside and then see what happens. But I still want to understand what is going on. I'm still getting the error. Hmm. But to be honest, I'm already tired, so I think I'm gonna stop here. I'm gonna figure this out off stream. The next thing, so after I figure this out, then I'm just gonna clarify this other stuff here. And I wanna get to the point where I can render the text there, and then once I do that, then I'm gonna simplify all these functions here. And once I simplify all of this and it's working, then I'm just gonna... So I think I'm gonna do the view and projection first here, because it's easier. So incorporate the projection and the view matrix on the calculation here, then set up them here. Then after I do that, then... And I do everything and I make sure that it's working, and I can change positions and everything. Then I'm going to just copy, pass this class to the other project, and then make it work with the other project. And continue to build the other stuff. So, not sure when I'm gonna come back, but